Hello again, everyone. I'm Tom Nagorski at the Cipher Brief. We are talking today about President Trump's day one directive to pull the United States out of the World Health Organization. We're not normally, as our audience knows, we don't busy ourselves with public health that often, but there is a nexus here. Some public health officials saying there's a very clear nexus between the decision and U.S. national security. We're joined today by Professor Lawrence Gostin, a distinguished professor at Georgetown University, among other things, the founding O'Neill Chair in Global Health Law. And Professor, you said in the wake of President Trump's decision to do this, to withdraw from the WHO, that it would not only be bad for public health, but, quote, even a deeper wound to American national interests and national security. And first of all, thanks for being with us. And can you tell our audience what you meant by that?
Yeah, of course I can. I can't think of a single way that withdrawing from the World Health Organization would advance our national interests or national security. I think it would make us isolated in the world, vulnerable and alone. Um, Taiwan is not a member of WHO, and Liechtenstein is not a member. And we would now be in that exclusive club. Um, so in my mind, this is really a deep wound to American security. President Trump, might be able to try to close the southern border against immigrants, but you can't close the border against a pathogen.
Mhm.
Um, Germs don't understand borders, and we need a global network of surveillance, monitoring of novel, dangerous viruses. We're only a mutation or two away from the next pandemic. It might even be the avian influenza pandemic circulating here in the United States now. So we badly need early warning, rapid response that WHO brings. And we also need exchange of scientific data like pathogen samples, genomic sequencing data, data about mutations and variants that enable our public health agencies like NIH and CDC to respond, and our pharmaceutical industry to innovate with effective vaccines and treatments.
So you mentioned data, and others have as well. In the wake of this decision, is public health data beyond our shores? And you've mentioned any number of cases just now. Is the WHO, can it be seen, or is it seen as a storehouse of that? Is that where all of this goes, or is it housed elsewhere as well?
It's housed at WHO. WHO hosts a vast network of government agencies, laboratories, and scientists that are constantly feeding it information about circulating viruses around the world, and providing updated information. Our public health agencies like NIH and CDC need that information. They exchange it regularly. Our pharmaceutical companies rely on it for up-to-date vaccines and treatments. Even our seasonal influenza vaccine, which changes every year, is all based upon WHO data. If there were a novel avian influenza, we would need that information to be able to rapidly develop a vaccine. The United States population is used to being first in line for life-saving medical technologies. We might find that we're last in line on the outside looking in.
Hmm.
So it's really important for us to be at the table, to have rapid and comprehensive access to these data, and to help our companies and our public health agencies to protect us. We can't do that alone.
Right. So that's the big picture. Can't do it alone. As a practical matter, what? And I know you and others have noted that I guess legally the U.S. is bound to. It's a year before they actually would pull out. Practically, let's say tomorrow the United States were not in the WHO. You mentioned Taipei and Liechtenstein. Uh, what happens when you are not? I guess we don't know. It's uncharted territory for the United States.
Yeah. it
But
is uncharted territory, but I think it's important for your listeners to understand that in Trump's executive order, he already has pulled out of the World Health Organization. He did not give a year's notice as required to do by Congress. He claims that when he initially notified the United Nations that he was pulling out in 2022, that the clock has already passed the 1 year mark. But of course, it didn't because Biden reversed it. And so it makes a mockery of what Congress required, which is 1 year. So, what does that look like? I mean, it is uncharted territory. And I'm not going to say that the United States is completely helpless.
Mhm.
It's not. We have very strong and capable pharmaceutical industry, CDC, NIH, FDA are world beaters. But it does mean that we will not have the full, rapid access to the kind of scientific information we need to innovate, to be resilient, and flexible, and to respond. And I think this makes America alone and fragile, and it hardly makes us strong.
So, Professor, if I can ask you, just tick off a few of the complaints that President Trump and others in the Republican Party, I know that these are not new to you, but others may not be aware, that they've levied for some time now against the WHO, that it had mishandled the COVID-19 pandemic. He said, quote, failed to adopt urgently needed reforms, unquote, and that it had demanded unfairly onerous payments from the United States. There was also the charge, which strangely reminded us of things that have been said about the Panama Canal, and these couldn't be more different issues, but that WHO is, quote, owned and controlled by China, unquote, and that it has, quote, ripped us off, unquote.
Yeah.
Care to
All right.
address any of that?
It's true. WHO is not perfect. They didn't make every right call during COVID-19, but I have to remind us that neither did NIH or CDC.
Yep.
This was a rapidly evolving pandemic, and they made mistakes on masking, on aerosolized spread of the virus, just like our agencies did. Um,
And the White House did.
and the White House did. Absolutely. In fact, the White House was touting really phony and dangerous treatments that had no scientific evidence behind them. So we can't lay the blame on the door of WHO. WHO needs to learn lessons, and it has.
Mhm.
And it does need reform. Would I like to see WHO funded better? Yes, I'd like to see the United States continue its payments, but I'd like to see China, Russia, um, uh, India, and other countries pay their fair share, pay
Mhm.
more. WHO has the budget of roughly 1/4 of the US CDC, but it has a global mandate. It's not a bloated, overfunded organization. As far
Right.
as China is concerned, I've worked with WHO for more than 30 years, and I can tell you unequivocally that the U.S. has had far more influence over WHO than China ever has. But the irony is that if we withdraw, that we cede leadership and influence to our adversaries, especially China. So I
Mhm.
think this achieves the exact opposite of what the president wants it to achieve.
Yeah. This may be beyond your purview, but tell me if so, or have at it if not. It does, to an outsider like myself, seem a little bit like the sort of approach taken, well, to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, to NATO, where President Trump said years ago, and he's gotten some credit since then for warning the United States might even withdraw from NATO, which it never did, saying that the member states had to pay more. Ultimately, they have for other reasons, perhaps. And do you think that there's some element here of I mean, he's gone through with the threat, but that to get other countries to pay their share, get the United States maybe back in?
I hope it's a ploy. Um, I would much rather that President Trump did a deal, um, uh, uh, engaged in diplomacy and negotiation, rather than just taking his marbles home and going away.
Yeah.
It's not going to serve the world's interests. It's not going to serve American interests. There is, WHO can reform. It can be stronger. It can be more nimble and resilient. If Trump can work cooperatively with WHO, that would be a win-win for everybody. But that's not what he said. He said he's withdrawing and he's going to try to set up something on his own. Well, that's fantasy land. WHO is the only global health organization, has been for over 75 years. The US helped create it. And it is literally impossible for the United States to try to replicate it. If we withdraw, and we did, and we have, it doesn't make us stronger. It makes us more fragile. It makes us alone when we need the world around us.
Yeah. Professor Lawrence Gostin, thank you for your time. Appreciate your being with us. And I hope that the worst case scenarios you paint don't come to pass. But thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you. Take care, Tom.